My name is Charles O. Smith, Jr. I grew up in Abilene, Kansas. I knew Eisenhower's mother, and I graduated there in '43 and was drafted in the service. Before that, I was working out to Camp Phillips on land that my wife owns. The day I met Verna was in high school. They had finally found, they were kicked off their place over at Smolin, where the Camp Phillips was, and they finally found a place south of Abilene, and I met her in Abilene High School before I went to the service. And I dated her in a Model A Ford 31 Roadster. When I worked at Camp Phillips, I did labor work because I didn't have any craft. I was still in high school. And my dad said, you better get back here. The draft board's gonna draft you. They're looking for you. Because I became 18 and they took me in the service then. And they sent me to Fort Leavenworth. And when I was down to Fort Leavenworth, they told me, we'd like to put you in the Navy or the Marines. Because I guess I was in perfect health. I said, I don't want the Navy or the Marines. I want to get in the Army. And they said, why do you want to get in the Army? I said, well, when I was growing up, all I ever heard was my dad talking about the field artillery, and I wanted to get in the field artillery. He said, well, we'll see. And he said, in 2 or 3 days, we'll have the roster on the bulletin board, and you can see where we're going to send you. So before I could go over there and look, the guys came over and was patting me on the back, and they said, you're got to be the luckiest man in the world. I said, why? I said, did I get the artillery? He said, hell no, you got the Army Air Corps. We all won the Army Air Corps, and you get it, and only 2 or 3 of us got it. He said, welcome aboard. So that's how I got there. They put me there. I didn't ask. I never even thought about it. And then I thought, well, maybe I ought to try for pilot. But I thought I didn't have geometry when I went to school, and I didn't have trigonometry, and I was afraid I'd flunk the test, because they would flunk you on most anything. If you didn't shave, they even flunked you. So I said, if I get kicked out of it, they'll put me in the infantry. So I said, I don't want to go to the damn infantry, that's for sure. So I had them pull my thing, and that didn't go over very good. They didn't like the idea I'd changed my mind, so they sent me to armament school in Denver, Colorado. And I went to Denver, Colorado to learn armory, and it was one heck of a place. I mean, it was okay, but it was so strict. What it was is teach you disciplines, what it really was. And they said, you're doing all right. And I was working on a machine gun, a 50 caliber, and the guy dropped the lid on top of my finger, and I got infection from the cordite in it and in the ammunition. And they said, well, you can't do nothing, not very much. He said, when it gets well, then you can go to do the armor stuff. See, you had to go to armory school before you be an aerial gunner. They sent me to be an aerial gunner because my height, I guess, and my eyesight and physical abilities qualified for aerial gunner. I didn't wear glasses or anything. I still don't wear glasses. Well, anyway, I said, I'm sick of this. And the guy said, I told you how you can get out. But he said, you better have a good excuse. I said, how? He said, flunk the test. Well, the test was easy because I hate to brag, I got a mechanical ability, and they knew that. And they couldn't figure out why I flunked the test, so they made me take it over, and I flunked it again. Well, I deliberately did it. I said, I want to go overseas. Go overseas? What for? I said, well, I just want to go overseas and help get this thing over with. So they said, okay, we'll take care of that. Guess where they sent me? They sent me to Jefferson Barracks, because I'd already had infantry basic at Lincoln Air Force Base before they sent me to Lowry Field. And so I took overseas training, wallered around in the mud and the snow and stuff in St. Louis in the wintertime, and I was there for a little while, finished that course. They sent me to Patrick Henry in Virginia. I said, where are we going? They said, you're going to go on a damn ship. That's where you're going. I said, ship, yeah. I said, where are we going? Said, well, you'll find out when we get there. So I never did know where I was going. I got on a great big damn British liner called the Empress of Japan. They had the Empress of Scotland, they had the Empress of Japan, and they were owned by Canadian Pacific Railroad, and they traveled the Orient. So we landed in Port Lyoté, which is outside of Casablanca, French Morocco. When I was in French Morocco, one day we were able to get a pass, and the first sergeant said, don't walk on the sidewalk. I said, in Casablanca. I said, why? He said, well, unless you want them to throw their night soil on you. I had another name for it. I don't want to say it. You better walk out in the middle of the street, because the French were mad at us. They were mad at us because their ships were sitting out there in the Mediterranean. You could only see the masts. With the Americans and British had sunk their ships because they wouldn't turn them over to the Allies. So they hated us. They hated us like everything. So we was there for a while, I don't know, a week or two, and they said, get on, let's go down the station. I said, where are we going? Said, you'll find out. So what was down there? French 40 and 8 boxcars. They had these French 40 and 8 boxcars where they had eight horses and 40 men in there, and they hadn't even cleaned them out. And we had to put our barracks bag in there, and we had to sleep in there. No chairs, no nothing. You had to lay in there. And we went through the Atlas Mountains, went through Algeria, Oran, and ended up in Tunis, right outside of Tunis. And I said, where in the hell are we? They said, well, you're in Tunis. I said, Tunis? I said, yeah, that's where you are. So I was in Tunis for a while, and one day I had a chance. Sometimes you had a chance to go places, so they said, do you want to go down and see an amphitheater? A Roman amphitheater? I said, well, yeah, I had a curiosity. I like to see things and learn things. So I went down there, but you could not walk any place because there was German mines out there, and they used a mine detector to check for mines, and they disabled the mines that were there. So I went down, and that was quite a colossal to see. There was a stone things around like a stone columns, and that's where they had the gladiators fight lions and fight each other back in the Roman days. So we went there. So one day they said, get your gear together. I said, where am I going? Said, get on the plane. I got on a DC-3, which was a C-47, and they flew me over to Toronto, Italy. And I joined the outfit over there, the headquarters and headquarters squadron, 315th Air Service Group. And I was in Toronto for a while. We sneaked off the base one night, and we met up with a couple of British guys, and we went downtown. We never got back to the base. We had to sneak back on the base because of the guards. We weren't supposed to be out. But we darn near got trouble down there. British guys who got to messing with some guy's wife down there, and an Italian drew a knife on him, and the other 3 British guys beat the heck out of him. And I said, look, we better get the hell out of here before we get killed. So we got out of there. We went back to the base, and I had to sneak through a damn drainage ditch to get back on the base. They knew how to get in and out. I didn't. I was new to it. So after being in Toronto, we went up, we had another deal, get in, we're going. So it's always we're going, you don't know where we're going and all that stuff. They would always, they had a reason for it. It was like professional lying. They'd lied to you to keep you from spilling the beans, you know, tell where you're going to go. So we went up to Bari, Italy, and it was a terrible place, Bari, Italy. It's on the coast there of Adriatic Sea across from Yugoslavia, and it was all bombed to hell by the Americans. I mean, there wasn't hardly anything standing. So we was there for a few days. I don't know why we didn't leave from Toronto, but we went from Bari. I guess we was going to go further up the Italian peninsula, but there was too damn many Germans, so we couldn't go there because we were a Air Corps support group. So we got on board a ship and went down the Adriatic Sea and then into the Mediterranean Sea. I was on a damn Polish boat. It was under the control of the British. The trouble of it was not trying to knock the British, but the British ships weren't as clean as the American ships. The American ships, the guys in their pastime were always cleaning and chipping paint and painting, and they were on the side of the ship chipping paint to keep down rust, and the British ships were in bad shape. Well, anyway, this Polish ship was terrible. So there was a bunch of Indians on there from India, our part of the Indian British Army, and they fixed up their food. Talk about smell terrible. Ooh, it was terrible. So we stayed away from that, but I said, where are we going? Said, you'll find out. So we land in Alexandria, Egypt. So I'm in Alexandria, Egypt, and I went down and saw a few of the sites on a pass. Had a 5-hour pass or something, 6 hours, I don't remember now. But you had to be back before midnight, I know that. I saw the different buildings and old Roman buildings and a former Greek deal where Cleopatra was, stuff like that. I didn't take in too much of it because I was so young it didn't dawn on me. If I was there now, I'd really go in detail, but I didn't think to go in detail. I was just interested in seeing what I could see. Well, anyway, we got on a truck, and they took us over and trucked us over to Cairo, Egypt, and we was on a base right outside of Cairo, a staging area. There was an airfield there, plus an infantry base, and they sent us over to an infantry base. And while I was there, I had a chance to get a pass. I went on a fast, I think it was electric train from Canchapara to Cairo, and I went down to Cairo to see the sights. I went down to what was like a Casbah, where all the shopping's done. It was so crowded you couldn't hardly move and wiggle. There was Arabs selling stuff and buying and carrying on. And while I was there, I had a chance to go to a mosque. So I went to an Arabian mosque, and the doors had sheet gold on the doors, big old doors, and it had sheet gold on them, but you had to take your shoes off. You couldn't go in there in GI shoes. So I looked it all over and got an eye full of it, and I went and toured other places down Cairo, looked around, you know, and pretty soon I was done looking, so I went back to the base, well, the same way I left, by that fast rail train, and I was out there at the base, and they said, we're leaving. I said, we're leaving, where are we going? Said, you'll find out. So they truck us up to Port Said. It's pronounced Said or Said, Port Said, up on the Suez Canal. So we get on board another ship. We go down the Red Sea, and you could almost touch Asia and Africa. It's so close there, and it's real close there in that particular spot. So we go down it, and I said, I wonder where in the heck we're going. They said, well, I don't know. Said, ask the sergeant. We asked him, he wouldn't tell you. It's the same old story. So when the ship landed, I happened to find out. I said, now where are we? He said, you're in Bombay, India. So I was in Bombay, India for a while, and he said, we're going again. So I said, where in the hell are we going now? He said, get on the train. We got on a train. It was third class. It was kind of reminds you of a bunch of cattle cars. They had first, second, and third class, and we were in third class. Naturally, the military wouldn't put you on first class. It treated you like nothing. So we get on that, and we went through all these Indian villages, everybody hollering, Bakshish Sahib, Bakshish Sahib, holding out their hand, wanting something free. And every village had its peculiar smell, and every one of them had a brackish-looking pond out back where they sometimes washed or did I don't know whether they swam or not, but they'd get in the water and this and that. And I noticed on the buildings and trees there was things on there, and I wondered, what the heck are those? They said, have you ever heard of cow pies? I said, cow pies? What the hell are those? He said, well, you come from Kansas. Did you ever burn cow chips? I said, no, we didn't. I said, the pioneers did. He said, well, that's what it is. And he said, each one of them put their handprint in it. And so one day I had the pleasure of watching them. They went behind the cow when it was going to the bathroom and got their stuff, and they plastered it on the walls and on the trees to dry so they had fuel. They evidently didn't burn any wood. They were burning these cow pies. So we had landed and we kept going. It took, I don't know, it took several days. Didn't count the days. It seemed like it was forever. So we landed in Calcutta, India. And I'll tell you, that was the dirtiest, horrible place I ever was in, Calcutta. You've all heard of the black hole Calcutta. I think the whole damn town was a black hole. I never seen so many cripples in all my life. One day I had a chance to go down. Guy said, let's go down to the Ghats. I said, Ghats? What the heck is a Ghat? He said, where they burn people. I said, burn people? So I went down there and I said, what's the deal on this Ghats? He said, they put people that can afford it, they burn them on this pile of firewood and stuff and burn them so they can go to their heaven. So I said, well, what happens if they can afford it? They said. I said, well, what happens if you can't afford it? He said, you see those bodies floating out there? I said, yeah. I said, are they floating? I thought they were swimming. He said, no, they're floating, they're dead. And there was guys out there bathing, and once in a while you'd see somebody throwing this water on them, and I thought, hell, they're throwing the water on them. He said they might even take a drink. And the damn people were out there bathing there when these bodies were floating out. I guess they went down to the Bay of Bengal. That's where this, I think it was the Ganges River, I'm not sure. But the rivers all in that area all flowed to the Sea of Bengal. Well, anyway, we were there for a while, and I went downtown. I never went to any place except the USO. The USO run a place there for GIs where you could get maybe get something to drink or get a sandwich or something. Of course, you had to buy it. So we went down to USO and read the magazines and stuff like that. So one day they said, "We're leaving." I said, "Leaving? Where are we going?" And I thought, I shouldn't even ask because they ain't going to tell me anyway. So we got on a plane, a bomber, B-24, which is converted to called a B-87. Yeah, see, 87 I think it is. They stripped out all the bomb bays and a C-87, that's what it is. It's called a C-87 for cargo. So they shipped the cargo over the hump in it and took the troops over in it, all over, and took out the gunners and everything else and had bench seats in there to sit. So we started flying, took off and started flying. This was up at Charbur, which is in the corner of Burma and India and China there. Started flying over the hump, and I looked out, clouds were everywhere, and I looked out the window and I could see the mountains. I thought, my gosh, it's mountains. He said, "Yeah, it's mountains, the Himalaya mountains." I said, "The Himalaya mountains." Said, "You are officially flying over the hump." I said, "The hump." He said, "Yeah, and the nickname is the Aluminum Trail." Somebody said, I said, one of the crewmen said, I said, "Aluminum Trail, why?" He said, "Because we lost so damn many planes flying over the hump that it's nicknamed Aluminum Trail." I said, "Well, I sure as hell hope we make it." Once in a while we'd hit a downdraft, and you'd think you was going to go through the bottom of the plane. Pretty soon you'd hit an updraft, and you thought you were going to go up through the roof of the doggone plane. Well, after that rough ride of 500 miles of hell, that's what it was called, we finally landed, and I said, we hit the ground, and it was nice and warm. Well, by the way, it was colder than hell up there because the damn B-24, the heaters weren't very good, and they had electric heaters, and if I remember, I don't think we had any flying suits on. We were flying just below oxygen level, and about 19,000 feet, I think it was, somewhere along in there, and it was colder than hell. If you had to go to the bathroom, you'd have been in trouble, I can tell you for sure. At my age now, it probably would have bothered me. Well, anyway, we finally landed, and I said, "Where in the hell are we now?" It was nice and warm. In fact, it was hot. They said, "You're outside of Chengdu." I said, "Chengdu?" Said, "Chengdu, China." I said, "China? Is that where I am?" Said, "That's where you are." So I was in Chengdu, China, and it wasn't really. I was in headquarters, and the headquarters was on a base called Xinjiang, China. That's where the base was. It was right outside of Chengdu, but I don't know how many miles. It was 10 or 20 miles to Chengdu. And they'd filled in the rice paddies and put in the airfield there, and the Chinese were still making the airport, the airstrip when I got there. It wasn't finished, and they were taking big river rocks and breaking the river rocks up into little rocks, and then they'd carry them over there in a double basket and dump them, and then another guy'd come over with mud and put mud in it, and then when they got that in there, they mixed the mud in there with the pebbles, and then pretty soon they came pulling a big iron roller about 4 or 5 feet in circumference, and they pulled it by manpower. They didn't use any horses. I don't know why they didn't use any horses, but the coolies pulled it, and the coolies did all the work. I watched the coolies when they were eating, and it sounded like you were slopping the hogs. They suck in the food, the rice. They give them a bowl of rice. They come along with a big wooden bucket full of rice, steaming hot, and they give each one a bucket of rice, or fill his little bucket with rice, and he eats it with his chopsticks. I tried to use chopsticks, and I wasn't too good at it. Well, anyway, they were working on the runway, and finally they got the damn runway made, and we landed our B-24s, and we had fighters on we had 5 fighter bases around the perimeter of headquarters, which is headquarters and headquarters squadron, the 305th Air Service Group. There was other air service groups, but I didn't know about them until later in a paper I have at home that was on the internet about it. I wanted to get a medal that I'm supposed to be entitled to, and I can't get it. The damn government up there, Navy, issued him, and they think I was a civilian. Well, you can't be a civilian and have an Army serial number. Well, anyway, I watched him pull these rollers back and forth, and they extended the runway, and I was wondering why they were extending the runway. Later on, I found out in comes some enormous damn planes. I'd never seen anything so big then. It was bigger than our B-24s, was B-29s. They brought some B-29s in so they could fly from Xinjiang or Chengdu area, clear over and bomb Japan and come back. Our B-24s could get there, but they didn't have enough range to get back or no fuel. See, they had about a 3,000 mile range, but it was a long ways from there to Shanghai and those areas. After the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor, they disbanded. They were only there about 7 months, I think, 6, 7 months in the Far East, in Thailand and Burma and China, and they'd fly into China and attack the Japanese there too, the Flying Tigers, and they disbanded them and called it the 14th Air Force. They took the title of the American Volunteers away from them. See, they called the American Volunteers in Washington, the guys that didn't like the idea, they called them the mercenaries, because they got $500 for each Japanese plane shot down. They got $500 a month pay, which is about more than a colonel got. Well, anyway, there was jealousy there, so they tried to keep supplies away from Chenault. What they were trying to do, it seemed like to me, put him on a starvation diet. We damn near starved, really. The stuff we had to eat, the garbage we had to eat. So, Stilwell was ahead of the whole CBI theater then, but Chenault was head of the China part. So Stilwell was in Burma, and the Japs ran him out of Burma. He said they ought to have infantry there. Well, hell, the China's so damn mountainous. With mountains, you couldn't fight with infantry. Chenault says you got to have the Air Force to whip the Japs here. So there was a big controversy, and Chenault and Stilwell didn't get along. So finally, Chenault had to go to pull strings. Him and Chiang Kai-shek had to go to Franklin Roosevelt to get new planes and supplies for us, because we didn't have a damn thing. Those original guys in the AVG didn't have enough ground people to help work on their planes. They had to work on the damn things themselves. They flew sometimes 5 missions a day. And I'll tell you, that flying 5 missions a day in combat is something else. That was in the 29s came there in the first part of 45, I think it was. We had the War One. The Flying Tigers had the War One in China then, but they wanted to bomb Japan, and so they brought in those 29s. We didn't get along with the 29 outfit. It was a LeMay's 20th Air Force, and we didn't get along with them. They were jealous of the company. the accomplishments that Chennault made. See, the Chennault's Flying Tigers with the 14th Air Force, which was called the Flying Tigers, shot down 2,500 Japanese planes. Nobody else has that record, plus thousands of tons of shipping of the Japanese, killed a lot of Japanese soldiers, bombed the bridges so they couldn't take the rest of China. They damn near had all of China until we got some help over there. Got the 14, got some more men. See, they were always short. The original Flying Tigers was in a volunteer group. They called them mercenaries. They got paid by the Chinese government, which indirectly got paid by Uncle Sam. It was a deal worked out with Roosevelt, Chiang Kai-shek, and Chennault that these guys, flyers, would teach the Chinese how to fly airplanes. They didn't have hardly an air force at all, so the Japs were running all over them. The Japs, we had about, 12, at least 10 or 12 bases in East China, and the Japs had captured all of them. We had to leave, and they just barely got out. The last one they left was at Guilin, was a 10th Weather Squadron left, and they came up to Chengdu, where we were, and they came and went out one part of the base, and the Japs were coming in on the other part of the base. They just barely got out of there. Well, anyway, without the 14th finally getting some guys, they wanted to call it the 14th Air Force. They wanted to take away the Flying Tiger emblem up in Washington. And Chennault and Roosevelt and Chiang Kai-shek, especially Chiang Kai-shek and Chennault says, "You're not taking away the Flying Tiger emblem. Don't give a damn what you call it. You can call it the 14th Air Force if you want." So he said, "We'll abide by that, but we'll use the emblem of the 14th of the Flying Tigers." Said because the Chinese named them the Flying Tigers. They said, "How'd that name come by?" They said, "Those guys fly those planes like tigers." So that's how they got the name of the Flying Tigers. And we wore the Flying Tigers on our right side of our blouse and our shirts, and we wore the CBI patch on the left. The CBI patch had the Chinese star in it and the American star and the American shield. We were always short personnel, so they sent me to be in the administration part because I'd had bookkeeping and typing in high school. I took a commercial course, and so they put me in the finance office, and I was in the finance office for a long time in headquarters, so I got kind of tired. And then you had to alternate. I worked in secret messages. I knew what was going, and I had to record all the messages came in from the other areas, you know. And then everybody had to pull CQ every now and then. That's when you stay up all night to watch things and keep things in order and check. Well, anyway, I got sick and tired of that later in the deal. You were gonna be able to get more rank, so they said, "We'll make you an acting sergeant, and before you can become a sergeant instead of a private first class." Well, see, I was in an old outfit, and all the older guys had the rank, and hell, you did all the work, and they didn't do hardly anything, but you didn't get any rank. You didn't even get any medals or nothing when you was there. It took me 62 years to get my damn medals. Anyway, they said, "We're going to open a slaughterhouse over on one of the fighter bases." We had 5 of them, A1, A2, 3, and 4, and 5, where they had the fighters that surrounded Chengdu area to protect the bombers, because the Japs were after the bombers. Well, anyway, I took that job. I said, "Well, send me over there on detached service." So I went on there in detached service, and they said, "Now you're an active sergeant, here's your orders." I was in charge one day, and the other guy, a college graduate, see, I only had high school because they took me right out of the service, took me and put me in the service right out of high school. Well, this other guy was older than I was, so he was really ahead of me in charge. He was a graduated University of Georgia, and he only had a PFC also. They didn't take very good care of the enlisted men. Of course, we were, I don't know how far it is from where Chenault's headquarters was. He was down near Kunming at Qiling, China, and he operated out of a cave, and we just didn't have an aggressive enough commander to get things for the enlisted men, and even the food was terrible. If we got any food, we were lucky. We were supposed to try to get food from the Chinese, and the Chinese didn't have much to give because they had a lot of people that moved from the East Coast to get away from the Japs, and they went inland, and they were around there, and they had to try to help feed them. I never ate a bit of rice when I was in China, and they grew nothing but rice where we were there outside of in Xinjiang, and I can tell you how they grew that too. Well, anyway, if you ever ate eggs that was buried in the ground that smelled like the ground, about make you throw up, it was terrible. Sometimes there was a dead chicken in them, and they were black, and they smelled like the ground stunk. And it didn't bother the Chinese. Hell, they were used to it. They ate boiled radishes. We had to eat boiled radishes. You could not eat any green stuff at all. Everything had to be cooked to death because they put human excrement on the vegetable gardens to make them grow. And if you ate that stuff, you'd get immediate dysentery and die. So we had orders, don't eat any raw vegetables. So we never ate any raw vegetables. I don't even know how we made it. Well, anyway, I lost a lot of weight too. Anyway, we finally, once in a while, would get a few PX rations, and they were few and far between. And they'd send over some summer chocolate. It was kind of bars, and it was mostly paraffin, and it had chocolate mixed with it, chocolate flavor, and you got that as a treat. And you might get a can of meat and beans once in a while, or vegetable stew or something like that in a real small can about the size of potted meat. And I traded for most of the guys wouldn't eat the other. They only wanted to eat the meat and beans, so I traded mine for the other stuff. So I ate the hash, and that it was called hash. It had onions and that in it. Then we had to eat boiled radishes, and I'll tell you, I hate turnips. I won't eat turnips today. I can't stand them. I can't eat radishes. And we ate them damn boiled radishes. And I'll tell you one thing, the only other thing they sent over there, they managed to get the damn cigarettes and the beer over there instead of sending K rations or C rations. We never got any K rations or C rations in China. I got them in North Africa, in Italy and there, but not in China. Well, one day the Japanese, one night the Japanese came over and bombed us. They used kind of anti-personnel bombs, little bombs about like size of a small bazooka shell, and they had C ration tins on them for Finns, and wondered where in the hell those come from. We don't get anything like that. We think that they were bootlegging them some way from India to the Japanese or something, or the spies or something. I don't know how the Japs got them, but they got them. And they'd come over and strafe us. And I'll tell you, when they came over from strafing, we had orders, don't fire at them. And guess what we had to fire at them with? An 1903 Springfield rifle. Air Corps guys with a Springfield rifle. When I was working finance, if we had a payday, I used to have a 45 automatic. Well, anyway, you couldn't hit a plane with a 45 automatic. Well, anyway, we jump in the foxhole when they had a air raid, and the Chinese had the slickest air raid system I ever seen in my life. They had these bamboo-covered balls they'd bring up. They were big, like about the size of 10, you might say 10 basketball sizes. And they'd bring those up and then tell you how close the Japs were to raid. And that's how we were informed of the raid. They didn't use any telephones or nothing because the Japs probably had them tapped anyway. Well, anyway, that's how we knew they were coming, so we'd be waiting for them. So the fighters would go up after them, and they flew in any weather, any time, night and day. And I'll tell you, most of them never got back to their base down in the Yellow River Bend because the Flying Tigers shot them down. They couldn't get back. The last raid we had was on the 4th of July, and there was rumor that there was a woman pilot in there, a Japanese woman pilot. I didn't see her, but I remember the day about noon when they shot her down, shot the plane down. It was the only one that was come over. They evidently didn't have any left. I don't know whether they were doing a reconnaissance or they were going to bomb. Anyway, they shot it down and they said there was a woman pilot in there. So they ran out of pilots. They had kids flying their doggone planes, some of them, because all the good pilots had been killed by the Tigers and the guys in the Pacific invasion in Normandy. I was in China. And then when the war was over, after the B-29s left our base, they went to Tinia. They'd captured Tinia to get closer to China, and the B-29s left our base right away and went to Tinia, flew across and went to Tinia and dropped the A-bomb. The war was over. They didn't have enough transportation. I was still in Xinjiang, outside of Chengdu, for a month or two after the war was over. Finally, they said, we're going to go to Shanghai. They did tell us that. We're going to go to Shanghai so you can go home. We got to Shanghai, and when we were taking off, we were so overloaded in our B-24, we like to never got over off the ground. And the pilot, I heard the pilot say, "Oh, crap, I don't think we're going to make it." I thought, 19 months in China, well, not quite, 17, 18 months in China, I'm not going to make it. So we finally just barely got off the runway, and it took hours to get from Chengdu to Shanghai, China. I was in Shanghai, China for at least a couple of months. Well, let's see, the war was over in September. I went there in maybe October or November. Couldn't get any transportation home. Wasn't no ships, so I had to stay there in Shanghai. So I went downtown Shanghai, and people that was in the international settlement kind of adopted the GIs, and we took us out to dinner and stuff, and they knew where to go. So you didn't dare. You had to watch where you went, so you didn't go just any place to eat. It had to be approved by the U.S. government. But they adopted us, and they couldn't do enough for us. They were so thankful to be liberated. They were in a international settlement with all kinds of nationalities. There wasn't no Italians and there was no French, unless it was free French, but they were Portuguese and British and Americans and that in this, that was captured by the Japanese, and they were put in a concentration camp. And so they went back to their apartments. They had apartments where they lived. They worked for the Shell Oil Company and finance places. See, on Bubbling Well Road in Shanghai is where all the commerce is done. And I walked on that road a lot of times. They had a racetrack outside there, but they weren't doing any racing then, but it was empty, but there was a racetrack there. But I went down there and saw the fancy buildings. There was Model A Fords there that were made in India with a right-hand drive. There was other Chevrolets and stuff, but mostly Fords, because Ford had a plant in India. Well, anyway, I was there for a while and couldn't get out to come to the home. And so finally, well, the war was over, and I was there. And I was there at the start of the Cold War. The minute the war was over, we had to be careful because the communists had jumped Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist Chinese. When I left Shanghai, I left on a Liberty ship on the North Pacific and bounced all over the damn Pacific Ocean. And it was colder than the devil. I mean, it was cold at North Pacific, and landed in Tacoma, Washington. We were supposed to land in Seattle, a port of Seattle, but it was full of ships and we couldn't go there, so they sent us down to Tacoma, and I landed in Tacoma, and I was in Tacoma, Washington for a while. My experience in the service gave me an education. I learned a lot of things I never could have learned in Kansas or any other place. I saw stuff that nobody else has seen. I even tried to climb the pyramids when I was in Egypt. I would say, if nothing else, if you want to learn something, join the service. You will learn a heck of a lot, and they'll make a man out of you. They had a saying, we'll make you or we'll break you. And I'll tell you, if you don't learn discipline, you'll be in trouble. That's a good place to learn discipline, I can tell you for sure.